Are we good, Terry? Okay, thank you. Because we're doing this live stream, in accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read, Section G11 MRSA, Section 403, a public proceeding through remote access during declaration of state emergency to COVID-19 and for 30 days following the termination of that state of emergency. The Curriculum Committee meeting will be held through Google Meet. The meeting will be live streamed and available for viewing at www.msad11.org.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. This is the October Curriculum Committee meeting. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the committee chair, Matt Marshall. I'm from Gardner. Nancy?
Nancy Cordia Brown, Randolph.
Karen?
Karen Collin, I'm the instructional coach.
Lindsay?
Lindsay Bickford, the math instructional coach.
Terry? And the most important person, Angela?
Angela Hardy, I'm the director of curriculum.
Okay. Hey, it's good that we're getting back to our curriculum meetings. I know that this is the first one that we've had in a while. But Angela's done a great job keeping everybody micro-informed during regular school board meetings about curriculum and things that are going on with curriculum. But I think it's good to sort of get a battle rhythm back, and we'll be having one every month moving forward. So Angela, without further ado.
Super, thanks, Matt. So our agenda today, we have a few items on our agenda. We're going to spend the first part focusing on instructional coaching. Karen and Lindsay are here. They'll provide an update and an orientation to what they're doing this year and how we've pivoted a little bit given the hybrid learning world we're in. We'll move into what it will look like if we go red and engage in some conversation around that. We'll spend just a few minutes on our assessment data that we have available to us. There's one window that still needs to close before we'll have the rest of it available. And then we'll close out our meeting and prepare for our next one. So starting is the focus on instructional coaching, and I just want to set a little bit of context. Matt and Nancy, you've been on the board for a while now, so you have a good sense of where our history has been with coaching. That years ago, we did have an instructional coach in the district, and over time, we dissolved that position. And then as we started looking back into our curriculum and change process, we realized that a coach would help us strategically enact instructional change to increase student achievement. So the district agreed to have a math coach, K-5, 2.5 years ago. So that's when Lindsay was hired. And then through the impact of that coach, the board spent considerable time last year really considering the opportunity of having a literacy coach K-8. They did a lot of research about what is instructional coaching, what has been the impact of having a math coach, how does it connect with the curriculum, and really established, supported the establishment of the position within our local budget. So because of that, we wanted to create some time at this meeting for Lindsay, who's the math coach, and Karen, the literacy coach, to really position themselves this year because of where we're at as instructional coaches. What does that look like? What does it mean? And what are they recognizing is working or are challenges? And so opening up a dialogue for board members to really get a better understanding of what it means to have a coach in the system. So I'm going to leave it to the two of them to share their thinking and then have you folks engage in a conversation.
Okay, so coaching this year is looking a little bit different than it has the past couple years. With all the COVID guidelines, we are assigned to a building for 6 weeks at a time. So we are each finishing up our first round in our first buildings this week. So I started in LER and will be making my way to Riverview. And Karen started in Pittston and is making her way to HT. So we'll have a rotation going so that each building is not without a coach for more than 6 weeks. A lot of what we're doing, at least at this point this year, is doing a lot of tech support, instruction. What does it look like on remote days? And really how to do our math and literacy practices in a virtual way and using our time as wisely as possible, especially when we only have kids in front of us for 2 days. Karen, I don't know if you want to piggyback or.
Yeah, to jump in on that, to build off what Lindsay said, also prioritizing our literacy and math standards, the most critical learning, which will take place in person, and then which pieces can be virtual. Sometimes doing a flipped classroom model. We've been working on that. Like Lindsay said, tech support with Seesaw and Google Classroom, the two platforms that we're using, just figuring out how to use those strategically. We have a phonics program for K1. I've been supporting teachers with implementing that across all four all three buildings. They're using Jelly Phonics K1, and then been at Pittston for the past 6 weeks, supporting teachers in that building, and then doing some meetings at central office or virtually with all the teachers. And Lindsay and I have also been providing professional development virtually most of the time, and then some small groups in person where possible.
So one of the things that we did right at the beginning, beyond orienting the staff and introducing the staff to Karen, was to say, okay, strategically, we're in a unique situation. How do we leverage your skill set and use that most impactfully with our staff? And so what we learned really quickly was that we implemented a new learning management software or learning system called Seesaw in our K3 or pre-K to 3 environment. And that required a fair amount of instructional guidance, not just how to use the tool, but how to use it for learning purposes. And I would say that we're still kind of in that learning evolution, even though we've been at school for 6 weeks. As we move forward, we're learning ways to do it, to use the software in more strategic and impactful ways, and support student independence over time, as opposed to dependence on a parent or an adult in the house. So that has taken up a good portion of their time. The other part that we did was, because we decided to operate a parallel learning program, the remote learning for cohort C students who are all fully remote, in K8 have teachers that are operating outside of the buildings, right? They're running their own parallel classrooms. We needed, because they are running 4 days a week, we needed to ensure that those folks were really skilled at their work, because it was such a new concept. So Lindsay and Karen I actually redirected and asked them to spend a great deal of time as we onboarded new staff, making sure they were really well positioned to teach in an entirely virtual environment. So that's where they spent a lot of their time. And then as a result, we were able to dig in and say, what are the lessons we're learning from this virtual space and from the use of Seesaw and Google Classroom that are now transferable to teachers who are in the hybrid spaces? So we were able to record some professional development and share that broadly. We were able to say, okay, what are the indicators that we can tell someone's kind of a bright spot or success, and who needs some additional support right away, and kind of have Karen and Lindsay be a partner for those folks who are in the hybrid space, hone in on those who need the most support right away, and then start building those relationships to broaden support as they can, either in person based on the building or virtually. That is different than what we expected last March when we started thinking, how are we going to use a literacy coach and a math coach? So it's been really interesting, but the one thing that I'm really proud of is the fact that they're really focusing on, how do we know students are learning and what has to be true to ensure that that time is meaningful, authentic, and productive. I can't say that we're there 100% yet. This environment is very stressful for a lot of people, so it's taking longer to get where we want to get universally. But certainly, everyone's giving 110% across the board in every classroom, with every educator. It's just understanding what that means when we've been trained our entire careers in teaching students in front of us. And so that's just part of it. Karen and Lindsay, I don't know if you want to share some of the either the visuals or some of the impacts, how you know it's working. Is there any sort of anecdotal evidence or visual evidence that you can share? And then Nancy and Matt, I just love it if you have some questions.
So already I've noticed from working face to face with some teachers at Pittston, because that's where I've been face to face, they're using a lot of formative assessments that they've started at the beginning of the year to inform their instruction, and they're differentiating and they're really thinking that through about each group and even the difference within the two cohorts. They're trying to plan carefully for what would be meaningful and productive for the students to do, and also we're starting to see shifts from activities that are related to activities that are really connected to meet a goal or like a learning standard for students. And so some shifts in planning, how those activities are laid out, and scheduling and the organization within the platform. Those are some things that at first, just getting to know the platform, you were teaching students and families how to use it, and the teachers were learning. Now they're able to use it in different ways to make it super clear for the teachers, parents, and students exactly what the task is, exactly how to do the task. So like Angela said, they can be really independent. So those are some nice shifts that we're starting to see happening.
Some of the shifts for math that I've been seeing. So not only are we starting school year in this hybrid model, but we also started the new math program that the teachers had chosen. So that added a whole other level of challenge to the beginning of the school year. But they do have an online platform, and it's been really nice because they've had some training with the curriculum associates. And so what they have been able to see prerequisite reports based on the diagnostic the students took at the end of September, and can then easily group their kids, and it provides exactly what they need to work on with those groups of kids based on how they did on their diagnostic. And it changes it by the different units in the program, so they can click whatever unit they're working on and be able to differentiate and break down by kids. We've also been looking at using the platform for iReady also to do some more personalized instruction. So there are things that teachers can assign to students to do virtually that will give them a video practice and a quiz. And the teacher can check on the back end to see how the student's doing while they're outside of the classroom. So that's been a really helpful tool this year to have that with our new math program. But the navigating part, we're still learning, still working on that so that we can see how we can best effectively use all the tools that it provides. So that's still taking a little bit of what's the best way to use it and when for our learners.
One question I'd like to ask and then see what Matt and Nancy have is, what does it feel like to be working with teachers right now?
It's different this year. It's like there's a sense of urgency. It's very like in the moment coaching. It's not like last year I feel like I was booked out like weeks in advance, and this time it's like teachers need something like, and they need like immediate feedback. And so we're trying to be open to whatever they need in the moment and trying to be available. So even if you looked at my calendar now, it might look open on Thursday, Friday, but I can guarantee by tomorrow my calendar will be full again, just because they're trying to get in any little thing that they need done. So if they are trying to figure out, how do I use this Jamboard in my Google Classroom? It's a quick email. And so we're trying to get on a meet and figure it out together, or I'm making a screencastify and sending it their way. And so it's different coaching. It's not like how it has been typically. I know we're going to get back to it because I have people down the pike interested in doing regular coaching cycles. But at this point, we're still in that kind of figuring this all out. What do I need right in the moment to keep moving forward?
I'm having the
So-
same experience.
Oh, go
Even
ahead.
being new to the district, I've been building relationships with teachers and getting to know them. But in my previous coaching experiences, we would, as would Lindsay, we would have a student-centered coaching approach where we'd look at student work, have goals for students, and work with a teacher across a unit of study in reading, math, or writing, word study, and stick with them for maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Where with this, like Lindsay's saying, it's a lot of immediate needs. So sometimes it's just a tech tool. It could be just like a one-time session, maybe brainstorming how I know how to do this face to face. How could this look virtually? And then coming up with working together and collaborating to come up with a plan for that and what that could look like. And like Lindsay said, making a screencastify or a little tutorial video. Sometimes we make some just right, tailored little videos just for them that they might not be able to find easily on YouTube, a tutorial. They might just need some one little piece. And so making it relevant for them. And we can do that virtually. So that's nice to be able to send that to them and they have just in time new information.
One of the things I noticed is that when Lindsay came on board, we gave her 6 months or so to really just establish the opportunity to develop relationships. And this year, with Karen coming on board, there isn't that opportunity. It's more, and it's almost like the teachers are like, okay, Lindsay was great. Karen seems great. I really need a partner. And let's just do this. And it's that urgency. And as a result, the experience is positive. And so now she's able to accelerate those relationships without that kind of dance that you do to make sure that this person is trustworthy and is skilled. And it's almost like, okay, I get it. And I need the help and I'm going to partner with you right now. So I've been amazed at how many names Karen has learned, how quickly. I don't exactly always know what she's doing with which teachers. That's not my role. But I am recognizing the frequency and the expansiveness of her connections already. And so I think partly that's because we laid a really nice foundation over the last 2 years of what coaching is and what that relationship is intended for. And it's partly because of Karen's skill set and her own entry into this work and disposition with the work. So Nancy and Matt, is this raising any questions for you?
I think I'd like to just say that I know how challenging it must be for the teachers right now. And if ever I was thankful for both of you coaches, I'd have to say right now I'm very thankful because I'm sure the teachers see the true value in both of you. And personally, I think you guys are doing a great job given all of your challenges.
Thanks,
Thank
Nancy.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo those thoughts as well. I think that the one thing I would ask though, is there anything that you see when dealing with teachers that they absolutely need or could use to make their life a lot easier from us? We do have some extra funding, I think, that has to be spent before the end of the year, and I'm not sure if we can use some of that money for curriculum stuff, but if we possibly could, that would be a great opportunity. So I guess that would be my question: is there something that they're something in their daily routine that they need that they're not getting? Do you know?
I think on my end for math, they're pretty good if they're missing something or need something. They're emailing me and letting me know, and I'm sending it off to Angela, and she's making it happen if she can. A lot of them still, all the tech stuff is now coming in, right, Terry? So once that tech stuff is rolled out to classrooms, I think their lives are going to be much easier. It's just been a waiting game for that stuff to come in.
Right, it was all on back order. In this day and age, everything is just moving at a snail's pace, so that's good news.
Yep.
One thing I would say is that's starting to pop up is the fact that we don't have a literacy curriculum and program. And that's not something we can resolve right away. It's something we were aware of. It's actually why we wanted to bring a literacy coach on board, is to we've been doing a lot of work with the literacy committee, the ELA committee, and we've recognized it's taking us longer than it did with math. We purposely slowed down literacy to get more people on board, to really to look at that broadly, make sure we have the right expertise around the table. So it was a strategic move. We just didn't recognize the role it played against a pandemic. And so a couple things that we're doing to kind of mitigate that. One, Karen's spending a lot of time really thinking about what are the elements of a literacy program, what do we have in place, and what kind of resources can we and access to help teachers feel in this in-person and virtual space that they have the capacity to move forward with literacy. Some of that's with our library staff really working on getting ebooks and checkout procedures and Sora up and running. Some of that is really just honing in on Jolly Phonics and Jolly Grammar and how do we do this in this new space. But it's a real challenge and really kind of a problem. Like we do have to do some more work in assessment, instruction, and curriculum resources. And hindsight's 2020, would it have been beneficial if we had accelerated this last year? Maybe, but I'm not sure we were well positioned to do that. I think we're in much better stead now. And what we're trying to do is just shore up the teachers' resources where we can. On that instructional guidance front, they have a lot of background knowledge and skill, and tying those together until we can kind of more universally and comprehensively move forward by next year. It'll look different. But that's, it's a gap that's real. And that's really K-8 all the way through. Kind of a woulda, shoulda, coulda. Any other questions about coaching? We failed to kind of really introduce Karen. I just realized that. Like, Karen came to us from Auburn over the summer. If you want to just quickly share your background, because they heard it once at a board meeting many moons ago, but maybe it just gives you a little framework in case you're asked.
Perfect. Yes. So again, hi, I'm Karen Collin, and this is my 20th year, I think. You start to lose track over time in education. And I've worked in New York City schools, did a lot of work with Columbia's Teachers College. I've worked in New Hampshire and in Maine in a few different districts. Did the literacy coach training program at the University of Maine, Orono. And I still collaborate with them now, and would like to eventually teach some classes on site at MSAD11 and offer some master's level literacy classes for teachers, which would be wonderful as well to build capacity in the district without having to travel, which is nice. And so, yeah, I did that in Auburn the last 5 years, and now I'm really happy to be here. Oh, and as a classroom teacher, I taught K1, 2, 3, and I was an interventionist for 4, 5, and 6. So I have quite a diverse experience from the whole elementary and up to 6th grade. Yeah.
We're very lucky to have you.
Yeah. I'm very happy to be here.
And she's a parent.
So far. I feel at home.
Sorry. You're a parent of twins, so I figure you can do anything.
Oh. Yeah. I have twin 13-year-olds, so I have twin 8th graders, so now I know middle school too.
Lindsay and Karen, is there anything else you want to add? I know that you have other things also pressing, but I wanted to make sure you had a little time with the group.
I don't think there's anything else, unless you guys have any other questions.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything else. Just that I just to build on what Angela said, that I've been thinking about a lot of things with the literacy, and look forward to working with you going into next year and making plans for how to move forward with some of our procedures and things that we're going to have in place to build the literacy curriculum. So it'll be great.
Yeah, and I really wanted to give our educators some time to kind of develop some routines and processes in this new world we're living in. So I will be reconvening curriculum teams in the near future. It's a little bit of a balancing act so that I don't put any one person over their current capacity, but it is work that we will be moving forward this year, even though we're in these difficult times, just because it's so critical. It's absolutely critical to get our students where we want to be. So I look forward to Karen's engagement with that group. So thanks, Lindsay and Karen. Have a great afternoon. I look forward to connecting with you tomorrow.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
So the other item on our agenda is really just making sure you're familiar with what's going to happen if we ever need to go red in a building or a district, and giving you some time to ask some questions, maybe make me think about something I hadn't thought about before, which is always helpful. So as you know from the summer work and the work we've done with the board up to this point, red is contextually based. It's based on, it could be one building, it could be all buildings. The goal is actually to enable a transition to live instruction remotely, K to 12. So right now, grades 9 to 12 does that anyway. If they're in cohort A in person, cohort B is streaming in, and cohort C. And then they flip that on the cohort B in-person days. In K to 8, we have this parallel remote program for cohort C kids. If we go red, we would maintain that. That would still continue as is. But we would move our K to 8 students to Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So 4 days of live instruction, with Wednesday still being that office hours, student supports, planning, and in the middle school and high school grades, clubs and activities and reach. We anticipate if we were to go red, hopefully it would be short term, 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks. There are some barriers. I mean, Terry and her team have worked really hard when families have indicated, the need for internet access, and we've identified those families, and many of them have hotspots now and that sort of thing, as you asked as a board. Students all have devices now pre-K to 12. But our challenge still exists probably in our young learners who probably will need adult support to log in and have access to their learning. So one way that we're trying to mitigate that is engaging with our childcare providers and having some conversations about what's going to work, especially with them because they have many children in one setting, and they'll probably continue to go there all those days if they're not at school. And so last Wednesday, I hosted another meeting with Main Roads to Quality and some MSAD11 childcare providers. Some couldn't make it, some working on a recap that's going to go out tomorrow to that group. And we just had an honest conversation about, so this is the plan that went out across the district about what red would look like. How's this going to work for you and how isn't it? And then what can we do to support you? And one of the ideas is to have ed techs who choose and can, because they're funded locally as opposed to funded through federal funds, to deploy during their work hours to licensed childcare facilities to be on the receiving end and support those students, not providing direct instruction. The teacher would still do that remotely, but helping them with those transitions, getting the computer open, checking the time, making sure the resources are there, helping with some of those intricacies of the learning platform. If a kid has a follow-up question, helping the child with the follow-up question. If the live instruction isn't happening or the child doesn't feel comfortable asking that question. Because a lot of our childcare facilities, while we're using this platform, aren't really well-versed in it. They have lots of children to take care of at different age levels, so there's no reason that they should be well-versed. And families are really relying on some of them to help their child access learning. So we met with Pat reached out with our lawyers and set up a memorandum of understanding to ensure that both parties would be safe and there'd be agreed upon practices. Basically, we'll all follow health and safety, and we'll hold each other harmless, and we'll keep the children at the center of our work. And we've checked with our insurance company to ensure that this is something we can handle with liability. And so far, we have green lights on both fronts. And when I talked with the child care facility leaders last Wednesday, I'd say about 2/3 of the group were really in support of this. Like, yeah, that sounds great. It would really help us, particularly in the afternoon, because the sessions for kids are broken up for a morning session and then a sizable break in the day so that they can move, have lunch, be kids, and then an afternoon block that's shorter. So we can still have engagement with learners, but it's kind of attending to their needs. Um, and still offer our interventions and such. There was one in particular who felt like, no, that's not going to work for my situation. However, I'll still support learning. Like, she's like, I think I can get it under control based on how we do hybrid. I can support it. There was some question about would they engage every minute of live instruction. So that's and what do we do if they can't? So it's certainly, the red plan certainly is not a foolproof plan at all. There are going to be some barriers for kids. One other strategy we put into place is if a teacher is providing during that live instruction any direct instruction that we consider like a short period of time where they're presenting some new material before you get into those collaborative or guided conversations. They can pin themselves in Google Meet and hit record. So it will record the teacher and whatever he or she is sharing without all the other kids showing up on the screen. But they have to remember to stop recording before they engage in that broader kind of virtual community learning session, because that's where we start getting into some issues of like, well, will children share something that's personally identifiable? And if so, then we can't post that recording. So that again isn't foolproof, but it's a strategy that we could use so teachers wouldn't have to be doing a live lesson and then create another entire lesson that they post in case kids missed it and have to do something later in the evening with their parents. And then there will be some kids who won't engage, and how do we identify those, and what do we do when they're back in the building to support them? So that they don't fall too far behind. And those are the challenges we're kind of trying to work through right now. So that's kind of where we're at. I have a visual if you want to see it, if you haven't already seen it when it was sent out. The 6 through 8 team would also be live, but those students are a little bit more independent and able to kind of access a schedule and use their devices to access learning. And it's more of a, will they engage in the norms of effective online learning or not? So that's kind of where we stand.
Do you have any idea how many kids are going to be in daycare if you do go to red?
I don't yet, but we do. I'm imagining at the K-5, it's going to be a sizable portion of our student body. So what we do have now is finally a database of all of our childcare providers across the entire district. And we have contact information for all of them so we can directly reach out to them. Our administrative assistants pretty much have a sense of when they go to a daycare provider versus home. So we probably could figure that out. We have, of all of our students, we have 286 in the virtual academy. So that's 12% of our student body. So that won't, so we're looking at 80% of our student body, and then how many of those will go to childcare facilities? I'm imagining it's going to be sizable. I'd imagine more than 50%.
I love the idea of giving the daycares support so that parents don't have to be burdened even more so by having to stay home, where they can still continue to work if they're able to, and to provide support with ed techs. I'd like to see that happen. I think whoever came up with that idea, it was brilliant because it keeps people working and it also helps support our students, which I'm always in favor of. So, for what could be a very tricky time, it sounds like you guys are once again just really thinking outside of the box.
Trying to, one of the childcare providers did mention that because she wasn't she was the one who was like, I don't know that I'll have someone come in my center, but what she said would be helpful is also dedicating a staff member and hopefully someone like an ed tech who knows the learning platform, who could answer phone calls, like be at each site and just say, and at least triage them, act like as the first responder to the situation and figure out, okay, who needs to know what, because that teacher will be live instructing. That teacher's not going to be able to do all that management. I think to do that, we'd have to train some people a little bit more because it's harder over the phone than it is in person in the moment. But that's certainly another way that we could attend to some of the concerns and increase work hours for some of our staff that I know are concerned about it. Matt, what did you want to add?
I was just gonna ask Terry, do all of our ed techs have laptops? Oh, great, okay. I knew in the past there had been an issue or two with that. I just wasn't sure where we had moved on that, that's all. Good, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's changed. It's been a game changer in this
Well, I'll
world.
talk personal experience when it comes to, both my kids are in the district. One is in fourth, and the other is a senior. And of course, it's easy for my senior to adjust because she's a little bit more focused. But my 9 struggling some, and hopefully by the end of he looks forward to going to school Thursdays and Fridays. The virtual piece that we're struggling with, that's all. But it just takes a little bit more. It's a little bit more stress on the parents, and I can attest to that. We're sitting down with him and finishing up, projects and assignments and stuff, and then he's got to work his way through the laptop and get logged in, and all the problems that come with that. So I think Nancy hit it right on the head. I think given what we're going through, you guys have really, really planned, and you've got a great roadmap to success, and it seems like things are running, actually, as far as curriculum goes, pretty smooth.
I'm curious at what the buy-in is. Well, first of all, have you introduced this idea to the ed techs? And if you have, what does the buy-in seem to be like?
That's a great question. So first, we introduced it to Chad Greenleaf and Ashley Morency, who are leading the Ed Tech Association. And because we wanted to make sure they were on board, and they were fully in support after working through a series of questions and coming to the same page. They were really fully in support of it and communicated that effectively to their association members. Then we worked it through with the administrative team because there are some guidelines with certain dollars where we wouldn't be able to deploy people out into those spaces. And so some people will qualify and others won't, but that will then allow us to say, okay, what are the available hours for what purpose, and make sure people are having the options that work for their role and that they play. So that's going to help some. And we're working on a shared spreadsheet right now to do that efficiently. And then administrators have been working with their ed techs to bring the concept forward and to figure out who wants to do this and who doesn't feel comfortable and why, and how can we utilize their services differently. So it's a little bit of a back and forth right now. We're kind of in this, we pretty much, if we go red, we're probably 70% there on knowing who's going to do what in terms of support staff. We're not 100% there. because of this kind of negotiated communication. But some folks are really into it and want to know exactly which site and when. And that's the part I need to follow through tomorrow on, is really following up with our childcare providers now that we have this virtual meeting, and saying, okay, here's the MOU, here's what we're thinking, again, and make sure you read through this carefully and that you are committed to it. And here's, we'd love these back by this date. So that then we can say, okay, these are the folks who are in on this end. These are the folks who are in on our district side. Let's make the match, so that if and when we go red, we're actually just flipping a switch instead of trying to build the system. It does feel like, you're always working against the minutes. Every time I turn around, there's a school that's closing for, 3 days or a week or 2 weeks, and we're not there, thankfully, crossing my fingers, knocking on wood. And it's affording us a little bit of time to continue to work through this process. But I think for the most part, the key is there's no mandate that one must secure their work hours through this process, but it's certainly an opportunity, and who's well positioned for that opportunity.
So I do have another question regarding special ed and what your thoughts are regarding special ed if we go red.
Yeah. So in the hybrid and in the middle school and the high school, students are live streaming in if they're identified with an IEP and engage in literacy, math, or other supports from special services on their remote days. So in person, they receive services, and then when they're home, they continue to receive services virtually, often with another small group that they would be engaged in if they were all there 5 days a week, right? Sometimes it's one-on-one, but mostly it's small group. And that's okay. The way we've set it up, it follows all the right guidelines. If we go red, that would actually continue, but everyone would be in the virtual space, and the teacher would be chiming in and working, following that same schedule that they're using right now. In the K-5 world, they're trying to operationalize that same model. So they're trying to get times when kids are at home or their childcare centers, wherever they are, and they're receiving services 4 days a week, 2 days in person and 2 days virtually. It seems to be a work in progress. Again, I think some of it is just like, when you're in middle school, you're more independent, and when you're in the elementary grades, you're less often at home, and if you're at home, you may need more supports in those early grades. So they're certainly getting their services in person, and they're doing everything. We're doing everything in our ability to provide those services virtually. There's been a little bit of a learning curve with a couple of our staff members to realize that, but I think we're there now. And it's always this like communication. What's the time frame for it? If we go fully remote, it's easier to provide the services. I don't know that it will be easier for families to receive the services, right? Because it's all going to be dependent upon their schedule. I mean, I'm sure some families would love to receive the services at like 7 o'clock at night. The challenge is we have staff who are employed at certain times and have contractual agreements, and that's really not something we've been able to think outside the box around yet. But I know that they're working on it and they're maintaining open communication. The one thing that the special services does do is they're working on something called an IRLP, individualized learning. I can't remember the R, but learning plan. And that's really a contingency plan. You have an IEP, and if we move to a individualized remote learning plan. So if we move into a remote plan, how will your goals be met through the remote environment? And that requires conversations with families and school staff to personalize that plan for them. And so our special ed staff are saints. Every one of them is working, to develop both IEPs and IRLPs with their families to attend to that very question. And there's, you know, there is concern, like, can we go green? Can we get these kids in person every day or 4 days a week, or and at what levels can we do that? And that's a question that the board will have to consider as we reconvene, and the administrative team continues to consider every chance we get, what has to be true to make that work.
It would really be nice to be able to do that. And, I know without putting out all these other small brush fires, it's difficult to focus on actually coming up with a viable plan to go green.
Yeah, we're working on it though. I mean, certainly not off the radar. It's definitely an area of focus. So that's the RED plan. And all of our resources we're using in hybrid in terms of curriculum will certainly transfer to the remote environment. Assessments was kind of our last feature, and it's already 417, but it was only a summary I was going to be able to provide today anyway, for 2 reasons. We do have our results from our math assessment, or diagnostic, and generally speaking, last fall, we had 16% of our students in what I would say are 20% zone. So the students that are going to need tiered supports and in extra interventions and supports, for short periods of time, some for long. Some of those students are already identified students in our system. So that was 16% last fall. And so I really wanted to see what this fall's data was in math, because we haven't been in school for 6 months. And it's at 21%. So it's not huge, but it's enough. It's enough to make a difference. And so we're really looking at that right now, and trying to understand what are our most efficient ways to provide support services for these kids in the classroom and outside of the classroom, to enable, especially in a hybrid zone, to enable them to make some strong progress this year. And some of that progress might just come from being in a routine and having school again, but and deliberate instruction. But some of that might also just need to be, looking at some of those gaps, and figuring out how to provide additional time to work on that. So I wasn't totally disheartened with the data, but it was something to note. And in literacy, we use NUIA right now. So that math is iReady. In literacy, it's NUIA. And that window is actually still open, partly because the first day we tried to provide remote diagnostics, we had a wind and rainstorm where everyone was losing power that Wednesday. And it was a hot mess. Families were so patient with us. I mean, it's like the first day we launch it, and power is out almost everywhere. So with our remote families, we organized that to happen the following 2 Wednesdays. And so now we have about 20 kids that were kind of just finalizing their assessment in literacy or in the middle school in math. And as we wrap those up with some alternate timeframes, we'll be able to close the NUIA window, and then I'll be able to get a much more comprehensive report. Right now, I can see reports as soon as kids, well, I don't look at individual kids necessarily, but teachers can look at individual kids, and they can look at class reports as that data rolls in. But to get a comprehensive district report, I actually have to wait for the window to close. And so we have it open for a little bit longer, and then I'll ask Terry to close it early. And I'll be able to next month really hone in on that data set for you and the implications of that. But a couple things that I thought you might like to know as board members. In our country, we have something called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP test. And it's given in 4th grade and 8th grade across the states. And it's usually a random sampling of schools in classrooms in 4th grade and 8th grade. And because of the pandemic this year, we have the state, the country is still going to have this test run. It's not run by the federal government, it's a different entity, but it's still going to run because it provides a data set, comparable data set. Our state is deciding to do 50% of the normal random sampling they would do. So fewer schools, will be engaging in the NAEP assessment. But one of our schools was still selected. And I think we're selected almost every year. One of our elementary schools seems to be selected, our middle school seems to be selected every year for this test. And the test itself is not really a bad test. It's just more time taking an assessment. There's proctors that come in from outside. So there's all kinds of procedures that are being put in place to ensure everyone's safety. And so Pittston Randolph will be the 4th grade group that will be assessed. We do not have the date yet. The window is between December and March. So, and it'll be like a 1-day window. I think it may be 2 days, because if we're still in a cohort model, they may have to come for cohort A and then come back for cohort B. That is to be determined. It's not something we get to negotiate. We don't get to say no, thank you. But I did want you to be aware that, so that our 4th graders at Pittston Randolph will be taking the NAEP. We've completed all the required paperwork, and so probably within the next couple months we'll have the verification of dates. It was not entirely surprising, given that our education, I want to call her a commissioner. It's not Betsy DeVos in the Department of Education at the federal level, has also opted to conduct the mandated annual testing this coming spring. So our state requested a waiver for this spring, as we requested one last spring. All states were honored a waiver last spring for like what we call our Empower state testing that happens at every grade level, grades 3 through 8, and then the SAT in grade 11. And at this point in time, that waiver for this coming spring has not been granted for any state by the federal government. So at this point in time, we are still due to have a state assessment in math and literacy in every grade, grades 3 through 8 in the spring. That usually happens in March, and the SAT in grade 11. However, we do have an election. And so I don't know what the results will be and what the impact will be, but I figured I'd wait until December to see if that's going to change at all. And then I think the other factor will be, how long is this pandemic impacting schools' ability to function all 5 days of the week in person, and how is that looking across the nation as we go through the winter? And will waivers then be granted late? And so, or not. So we at this point in time, we will prepare to take the state assessment. I'll do all the trainings I'm supposed to do this fall and winter in preparation for it. But I think it's, even though they said they will have it, I still think it's kind of a question mark. We will have data, local data, because we conducted our diagnostic in math and literacy already, as I just said. We're just finishing up one of them. And we will conduct that diagnostic again in sort of end of April, beginning of May. And so that will give us our own local data, year-over-year data, and within year data, to see what our impact on student learning has been. But I'll have to keep you up to date on terms of the state assessment system.
I'm glad we're continuing with our own data, because I like to have tools to measure by. So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, and the teachers, I mean, we're trying to be really sensitive to how much time is being taken away from instruction for something like a universal screener. So we are paying attention to some of those decision points. This is one that the data that comes out of our iReady Math is so powerful and helpful in terms of the program we selected, in terms of the intervention supports we have, and in terms of the online platform we decided to purchase. And so because there's so many direct connections and resources for staff, I think that they found value in using the time. With NUIA, those direct connections are not as explicit. So, you know, we've just got to do a little work there, or look at our use of an assessment. But it's still important, and it will still help inform some of our decisions. Any questions?
No, I think it was a helpful meeting.
Yeah, thanks for everything. I know right now it's super, super challenging for everyone. Again, I will reiterate, if ever I doubted the benefits of coaches, I don't doubt it anymore. Truly am very appreciative that they're there to help support. Tough year, very tough
Yeah.
year. And
Yeah.
Angela, you don't have an easy job. So very much appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. I think that's true for everyone right now in education. And luckily we have a good team. I feel like we're all kind of in it together to help the kids. Can you say that again, Matt? It went in and out.
Yeah, I think it was a great decision to add that extra coach. Definitely going to help and make a significant difference with the faculty.
Yeah, and because of her experience, she was able to hit the ground running, which just helped us immensely. We weren't, you know, training a brand new coach. We were training someone to understand our context, and then she could take her skill set and just go with it. And her disposition is such that it's so easy to become comfortable with her, which I'm grateful for. Yeah.
And plus,
Right, I
she's
think. Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just gonna say, plus she's a mom of twins, and I'm a mom of two sets of twins. So, there's some brilliance right there.
I might have raised her mom experiences for a reason, Nancy.
I was going to say that I think that there's some other tools that she brings to the table too that'll be helpful down the road potentially for some of the teachers.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So just so you know, with the math coach for 2 years, we continued to pay Farmington an annual stipend. It's just a little annual fee, so that Lindsay had direct access to professors, resources, ongoing training, and a network where she was. A network of coaches and professors who actually came into our district and observed her practices and gave her feedback, kind of like a fishbowl style. She had to do her work and really get feedback outside of our district based on the expectations of what coaching is. And so Karen's already gone through that process from the literacy lens that happens at Orono, so she's at a little bit of a different stage. But we were able to pay an annual fee. I leveraged some title funds to pay that annual fee to enable her to continue with that network and professional development. In her case, not only does she receive it, but she actually provides it to coaches across the state. And then that also gives her access to that ability to teach university graduate level courses in literacy in our district in the future. So I opted to just redirect, now that Lindsay's in her third year, to redirect funds that we were using for that network support for Lindsay, now that she has an established network across the state, towards the literacy component, so that we can build up our network in this district and utilize her skill set through that agreement with the University of Maine Literacy Coaching Project.
Nice.
So that'll help us move forward too. Well, it's 4:30. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 10th. So we should be able to get back on track. So it'll be right before that Veterans Day, from 3 to 4. But it will be after our next full board meeting.
See you then.
All right, Matt, are we good to close out?
I think good. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry, for
Bye.
videoing this.